good time. Okay. Hello, dear brothers in St. Vincent de Paul. Our topic before us today is on the spiritual and psychological accompaniment of vocational process in the congregation of the mission. The purpose of this paper is to develop a vocational culture which is in line with the goals of the congregation of the mission, sent to bring the good news to the poor. The specific objectives are three in number. The first is to acknowledge and appreciate the candidates discerning for vocation in the company as comprising of body, soul, and spirit. Two, to identify and highlight the roles which of these components play in the growth and development of the candidate's search for God and his own personal identity. Three, to properly integrate and harness the psycho-spiritual perspectives in the candidate's spiritual growth and development. The problem it seeks to address are one, to the seeming or total neglect of the basic components of the human person as body, soul, and spirit. To the lack of cognizance of the role of each of the compositions in the individual's developmental process. And finally, the lack of a proper sense of direction and of personal identity. Against this backdrop, the study came up with the following findings: that we can no longer treat separately the concerns of the mind and the soul without also realizing that we are spiritual beings immersed in human experiences. We cannot put out our emotions and spiritual problems in separate compartments. So the need of the hour is the integration of psychology and spirituality in accompanying the candidates to the priesthood in his search for God and personal identity. Based on the findings, the study recommended the full integration of the psycho-spiritual approach, which demands for more flexibility, creativity, and openness to new realities, both on the side of the candidates and formators in the vocational accompaniment process. Background of this presentation. St. Vincent de Paul believes that a man of prayer is capable of doing all things. This is because of his longing for God, which is also the propeller for his actions. On this note, then, the candidate to the priesthood should not only desire God, but must be seen and known to be a seeker of God. That is, one who has the hunger and thirst for God. Developing a vocational culture is as important as the life of the congregation itself. For a good vocational culture yields a healthy community of brothers, and it is a blessing to the mission. Since our life is geared towards mission, our formation also should be geared towards the mission. A suitable vocational culture after the mind of St. Vincent should necessarily be God-driven, in the sense that it is the charity of Christ that urges us on. A vocation is often described as a call from God. In a sense, it is how we answer the question, what is the meaning of my life? The word vocation comes from the Latin word vocationem, nominative vocatio, that is to call, being called. But God's call does not come as a voice blooming from the sky or as a thunder with lightning from above. He more often answers us in suitable signs, and we can need help to recognize this call for what it is and discern God's purpose and plan. A good example is the call of Samuel, which we all know in 1 Samuel chapter 3, 4-9, where God called Samuel and he thought Eli was one calling him. And he went to him and Eli said, when next the voice comes, just say, speak, Lord, for your seven ways, and we need a guide to help us to answer this call. It is not as simple as choosing a career in life. That is vocation. Finding one's vocation and its accompaniment takes time. It is not a day affair. However, it goes with a deep longing for God, a quest to draw closer to Him. Sylvester de Paul used to think through things very carefully and only moved to action when he was absolutely certain the action was God's will. His words are quite apt here. He says, so, my son, you are discerning God's will for you. It will remind me of the times I often spent in prayer and discussion with my spiritual director about the path God wishes me to take. You will succeed in your quest if you unite your will to God's will and reflect honestly and fearlessly on the question that I and my priests and brothers ask in our time of discernment. What would you have me do, O Lord? The impact of that which is given during formation greatly defines the life of the community in general. When there is a flaw in formation, it is carried over into the community and invariably into the mission. As scripture says, foundation once destroyed, what can they just do? Psalm 11 verse 3. The spiritual and psychological accompaniment of vocational process in the congregation of the mission is aimed at encouraging formators and all those involved in vocation accompaniment to give full attention to the spiritual aspect of the individual as well as his psychological development and well-being. It is not enough to say that he prays well if he cannot relate with his brothers well. It is a sign of a future anti-community person. In fact, how can you claim that you love God when you do not love your brothers in the community who are also created by God? We are called to relate to God in the same manner we relate to our fellow human beings, with our bodies, our minds, our souls, and our spirits. We relate to God with our emotions and our impulses in both our conscious and unconscious states. Whatever is good remains good, no matter where it is done and to whom it is done. And whatever is bad, no matter where it is done and to whom it is done. In this way, the psychological mechanisms that mediate our relationship with our human neighbors are also at play in our relationship with God. We are simply saying here, be fully human. Be fully human. Basic elements in vocation. Search for God. In the spiritual and psychological
básicos da vocação. Procure a Deus. No acompanhamento espiritual e psicológico do processo vocacional, 2 elementos se destacam com muita força para que busque a vocação, possuir como questão de importância.
Benedict would call the search for God in their common rule. It was elaborated there. If you consult the Benedictine rules, you will see it clearly. It is important to pay attention and to find out if the candidate to the priesthood truly seeks God. This is because whoever wants to be a priest must be a seeker of God. It has to be God that the candidate seeks for him to approach the seminary. If not, he will be in the wrong place. The seminary is not where you go and read accounting or read medicine or become an engineer. It is where you be a priest. Therefore, you must see God. It is only in seeking God and finding him that the person can now walk with him. For it is in the inner restlessness of trying to know God that propels one to do what God does, serving him in our neighbor, etc. So, the inner longing for God is the prerequisite for the commencement of a vocational process. One may ask, how would you know that the candidate seeks God? Or What are the signs to look out for in a candidate who truly seeks God? This is not in the script you have, but I have to highlight it because it's very important. One, he must be a man of prayer. Vincent says, give me a man of prayer. He is able to do all things. The candidate should not only be seen participating in community prayers, he should also make out time for his private prayers and devotions. Two, he must have love for the brothers and the community. Vincent says that there is no alternative to community living. Community life is at the soul of our existence as missionaries, for we come together for the aim of harnessing and harmonizing our gifts for an effective and effective evangelization of the poor. Like the Bible says, if two do not agree, they cannot work together. Amos 3, verse 3. 3, he must have love for the poor. Vincent says that the poor are our patrimony. The poor are those who live in the margins of the society, who are marginalized and have been abandoned by the society. We live for their sake, to give meaning to their lives. Stable identity. Another point to note in vocational accompaniment is stable identity. Stable identity has to do with emotional maturity and self-awareness. This is the ability to relate and share well in the community, the ability to guide and make sound judgments. Developing one's own identity is a complex process that actually begins long before priestly formation. The environment where the candidate grew up influences and stimulates his actions, and sometimes it may continue long after ordination. And this is why, as Vincentians, it's important for those responsible for recruitment to be able to know the family of the candidate, and the candidate should be able to write down his background, his life, his profile, and those accompanying him in the seminary should be able to, once in a while, go back to what he has written and his lifestyle and know how to assist him, because people's background oftentimes have great influence on them. The term identity indicates a basic familiarity with oneself, a feel at home with oneself. This means being able to manage the world of one's own thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. It means know where you come from and be able to say where you want to go. The development of a stable identity is a challenge in formation, which means that the formator has got a lot of work to do. You see, especially in Nigerian context, for example, you see young seminarians, you ask them, what do you want to be? They say they want to be like Mbaka. Mbaka is a priest that is into charismatic healing and all that. And you see seminarians, they are studying how to perform miracles, those signs and wonders, and then watching healing movies, even sometimes from Pentecostal pastors. So you see there is an identity crisis. You don't even know what you want to be. And this calls for action. Formator must pay attention to the kind of books, movies, and how the seminarian spends his private time. The formator should have the ability and skill to accompany these processes of development towards a personal identity, and to help the candidate to verbalize the inevitable search tensions, concerns, worries, challenges, and other questions, and help to mode. Part of why it is good to go back to the background of a candidate and study the profile, his biography, which has written from time to time, is also to know whether his narrative is helping him to grow or stunting his growth. And sometimes you could tell him to, share more. From the time he came into the seminary, or from the last time you met him in a session, and now, what has changed? What is the new story he would like to share with you? It is good that we get them talking from time to time. They have to talk, and we must give them the atmosphere to speak. if a formator is not one that has the patience to listen again and again to a candidate, you'll not be able to help the candidate. Especially when you are stern, when you have a stern face, when you are scary, and you feel you have to use loud voice, you have to intimidate them. You will not get the best from them. Information work should go beyond shouting and all of that, but more of even for a director, to be able to accompany them and get the best out of them and be able to share their narratives with confidence. Stable identity is therefore the concept a candidate develops about himself that evolves over the course of his life. We move to spirituality. According to Barrett's, spirituality can frequently serve as a source of therapeutic strength and courage. It draws its strength and courage from the personal experience of God and faith in Him, besides all other spiritual means that empowers a Christian. Experience shows that in spite of good motivation and long hours of prayers, oftentimes our spirituality, when not understood rightly, has not given us sufficient self-awareness to make a qualitative change in our values, our commitments, interpersonal relationships, etc. Traditionally, the religious person was taught to deal with the problem of holiness by suppressing psychological and physical needs, while consciously striving to be perfect. You can check Code of Canon Law of 1982, paragraph 35. However, now the understanding of spirituality has taken an exceptionally good turn. Today, spirituality is looked upon as a journey. It's not a destination, but a journey. You have not yet arrived. As long as you are alive, you are on a journey. A journey on earth that constantly calls for conversion and maturing. Every day, you want to be better than you were yesterday. So it is an ongoing, constant effort of conversion and maturation. This means that we have not yet reached our destination. That's right. We are still on the journey, yet to arrive. Constant efforts towards maturation is needed here. The focus on seeking God holds sway, for it will help in shaping our personal identity, making us truly aware of who we are. Notice that Pope Francis, in his principles of 4 proximities for priests, listed closeness to God through prayer as the first proximity and quest for a good priest. This is because a priest is meant to be, first and foremost, a man of prayer, a spiritual man. So anyone indicating interest into the priesthood should be seen to love prayer and to a certain level be a man of prayer. Remember Vincent de Paul. The other proximities which Francis propounded includes closeness with the bishop, closeness with other priests, and closeness to the people of God. These proximities clearly state the need for community life. That is, the priest is not an island, and he cannot exist all by himself. Brotherly fraternity with his bishop, with other priests in the local church and community, as well as the closeness with the people of God, is indispensable. Pope Francis emphasizes that if there is no closeness to the people of God, you are not a good priest. That is why he also talks about smelling like the sheep. Closeness is very important. It is when you're close to God, actually, that you learn to be close to the people of God. So in the process of vocational accompaniment, the formator is to pay attention to the fact that the candidate has to be properly integrated into the life of community living. According to St. Vincent de Paul, there is no alternative to community life. It is not an option for his missioners. Psychology. Psychology is the scientific study of the behavior of individuals and their mental process, which gives a great insight into our adult behavior. Endorsing the benefits of psychology information, Lance Perry, citing Gaudium Express, says, psychology can foster psychological and spiritual maturity. One should, however, admit that certain aspects of psychology are not in accordance with the mind of the church. Yeah, in as much as we want to bring in psychology, there's also a limit to it. And that is why when you are bringing in a psychologist, make sure you are inviting a Christian Catholic psychologist. As a matter of fact, I prefer religious psychologists, maybe priests or sisters, because they'll be able to know what we need, what we want, and help in impacting them in our candidates. Than going to bring all together a freelancer, a free thinker, and say he's a psychologist. It's going to cause confusion in the formation house. We also know that issues of homosexuality is a good example here, which is not accepted in the church. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association, APA, declassified homosexuality as a psychiatric disorder and defined it instead as a sexual orientation disturbance. The Catholic Church, on the contrary, holds firmly that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. Under no circumstances can they be approved. You can compare Catechism of the Catholic Church 2357. So the term psychospiritual has entered psychological and religious discourse as a loose designation for the integration of the psychological and spiritual in our formative system. As a broad term, it can denote a variety of positions between psychology and spirituality. A supplementation, integration, identification, or conflation of the two fields, bringing the two fields together, merging them without throwing out their significance. It is commonly used to describe the wide range of therapeutic systems which embraces a spiritual dimension of the human being as fundamental to psychic health and full human development, and which utilize both psychological and spiritual approaches. Acknowledging and appreciating the candidate for vocation as comprising of body, soul, and spirit. Every human person is composed of body, soul, and spirit. And in order to truly get the best out of a person, great attention is to be paid to this human composition. The modern word psychology derives from two Greek words, which when combined means the study of the psyche. And what did the ancient scholars understand by the psyche? Research shows that for thousands of years, when scholars of both Greco-Roman and Arab, as well as the Asian tradition, spoke or wrote of the psyche, they meant the soul, the spirit, or the breath of life. It is to be noted that the ancient scholars did not make any sharp distinction or differentiation between religion and spirituality on the one hand, and philosophy and humanities and the natural sciences on the other. They were often one huge body of knowledge, and scholars traversed seamlessly between these territories. We see this from the writings of Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, to those of Thomas Aquinas, Duns Scotus, Francis Bacon, René Descartes, and Thomas Hobbes. Ali Hamed Almas, initiator of the Diamond approach to spiritual work and psychotherapy, observes that in ancient times, psychology was part of both religion and psychology. In the Christian religion, psychology was the knowledge of the soul and the study of the techniques for developing, healing, and purifying the soul. There was a similar understanding of psychology as soul care or work with the soul. In Sufi Islam, in Kabbalah Judaism, in ancient Buddhism, as well as Hinduism, as an integral part of philosophy, psychology was simply the study of the soul. It was not seriously differentiated, nor was it understood to be independent and altogether separate from religion and philosophy. Indeed, ancient scholars understood that psychology had an inherent connection with spirituality because psychology deals with the mind and the soul. And they understood that the ground of mind and soul is ultimately spiritual. Many of them did not see how the experience of the human soul and its well-being could be neatly divided into a psychological part and a spiritual part to be handled, one independent of the other. As it evolved through the Middle Ages, however, psychology came to be recognized as an independent discipline, and it was defined as the science of the soul. In our own day, psychology is defined as a science of the mind and human behavior. You can see human behavior has been singled out. The soul no longer features in the definition at all. This signifies a radical denunciation and denial, or is it a rejection by psychologists of the historical roots of their enterprise? Many modern psychologists now consider themselves as operating strictly within the confines of a purely naturalistic or empirical system, even when they are daily engaged with the complex dynamics of a creature whose existence straddles between the body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. Even when the profound human needs, which many psychologists are called upon to meet, do definitely transcend the naturalistic frame of reverence. And yes, even when a number of the disorders which psychotherapy sets out to treat have much more to do with religion and spirituality than with medical science as such. We are now confronted with the challenge of ministering to our generation a holistic psychological or psychotherapeutic care that takes into cognizance the complexity of the human phenomenon as body, mind, soul, and spirit at one and at the same time, with each one of these dimensions able to influence and impact the others for good or for all or for ill. And even though organized religion appears to be failing or losing widespread appeal, as we can see in the West, there is also a noticeable failure of professional psychologists who see themselves as pure empirical scientists to replace religious practitioners in answering the deeper questions that trouble the human soul. Since, as you observed earlier, the human needs that send clients to psychotherapists often transcend the naturalistic frame of reference into which the modern psychologists and psychotherapists have confined themselves. This indeed is the existential dilemma of the modern practitioner, who finds himself or herself locked within the narrow confines of the scientific method, perceiving reality only with the eyes of the flesh and the eye of the mind, while denying the existence and legitimacy of that sphere of reality, which can be perceived only by the eyes of contemplation, the eyes of metaphysics, or the eyes of the mystic. The Bible makes bold to say that our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So you cannot exclude God. You cannot exclude spirituality information. Ancient scholars, however, had no such limitations. From Plato to Aristotle and from Augustine to Bonaventure, ancient scholars studied, analyzed, and treated the human person as one composite entity. Their form of epistemology was comprehensive, not monological or compartmentalized. The areas of knowledge we know today as psychological sciences were an integral part of philosophy and theology. An ancient form of clinical psychological practice and psychotherapy as known as soul care, an enterprise that belongs squarely to religion and spirituality, as practiced not only by Christians, but also by Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and adherents of the African traditional religion. It happens in my village. Integrating the psycho-spiritual perspectives in accompaniment. Our Christian faith teaches us that we relate to God in the same manner we relate to our fellow human beings, with our bodies, our minds, our souls, and our spirits. We relate to God with our emotions and our impulses in both our conscious and our unconscious states. In this way, the psychological mechanisms that mediate our relationship with our human neighbors are also at play in our relationship with God. If you see the story of Anna in the Bible, when Anna had to wake up early in the morning and went to the temple at Shiloh to pray for a child, and she was talking like somebody who was drunk. The prophet Eli saw her and thought that she was drunk. So her emotions was at play. So that is how we have to put our being together in order to become the best we are called to be. And when Jesus says in John 10, verse 10, that I have come that they may have life and have it to its full, we understand that he meant to bring us a comprehensive redemption or a restoration in the entirety of our being at the level of our body, mind, soul, and spirit. Yes, Christian salvation is designed to restore the total personality and not just some parts of it. When Christ came to save us, he came to save us body, mind, soul, and spirit. So formation must take cognizance of body, mind, soul, and spirit. This is the reason why in vocational we follow Jesus with body, mind, soul, and spirit every day, which stands for total giving of the self to God. Summary and conclusion. The essence of this presentation is to highlight the pressing need of the formator to integrate psychological tools and approaches in vocation accompaniment process with that of the Christian spirituality, especially as it boils down to the Vincentian spirit and charism. In doing this, the formator is to pay attention to the fact that the candidate needs to manifest a desire that seeks for God. That desire that seeks for God has to be there. When one doesn't long for God, doesn't hunger for God, what is he looking for in the seminary, in the formation house? And he has to help the candidate to develop a stable identity. The candidate must have a stable identity, which boils down to, man, know thyself. Who are you? What are your values? Are you aware of yourself? St. Vincent tells us that Jesus Christ is the rule of the mission and shall be considered as the center of his life and activity. Thus, he went on to say that we'll live in Jesus Christ by the death of Jesus Christ, and our life ought to be hidden in Jesus Christ and full of Jesus Christ, and that in order to die like Jesus Christ, it is necessary to live like Jesus Christ. This forms the fundamental basis of the Vincentian vocational accompaniment process. I would like to stop here for questions. if there will be any. Thank you. Father Callisto.
Obrigado. Thank you, Father Cosmos, for the presentation. E agora vamos dar 20 minutos para interação, para alguma pergunta. Quem quiser pode levantar a mão, dizer o nome e a província de origem. Então, depois dos 20 minutos, vamos dar palavra ao assistente que está aqui conosco, o padre Domenic. Nick. Father Ernest, I told us that they lost the sound in English.
No, I said it's back. It was a bit moment that we lost the sound. Okay. As I'm here speaking, I would like to congratulate Father Cosmas for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
It was helpful. I would like to understand more about stable identity.
Your name and province.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ernesto Zungus from the Vice Province of Mozambique. And as I was saying, I would like to understand more about stable identity, because we are living in a world that many things is presented to our life. We are in search to find something. When we receive a young coming, applying to be with us, he is in search for God, searching for something that he feels that it can be he himself when he follows. This stability is according to whom? To Jesus Christ, to his own culture, to the culture of the congregation, which is stability that we are talking about.
Thank you, Brother Ernesto. Now, the culture of the congregation is the culture of Jesus Christ. And it is Jesus, the evangelizer of the poor. That is the culture we have, because there are various other culture aspects of Jesus Christ, which various people use as their charism and spirituality. But for us, it is Jesus, the evangelizer of the poor. Now, it is the Jesus who will prefer to be born in a manger instead of to be born in a very big city, maybe in Jerusalem or in Rome. It is the Jesus who will prefer to be to die on the cross instead of dying a more honorable death, in quotes. It is the Jesus who, instead of sending out the 5,000 to go and look for food by themselves, who will say, the apostles, give them food yourself. We are meant to care for them, not only to give them spiritual nourishment, we should also care for them materially. a Jesus who is moved with pity and compassion about the suffering, especially a Jesus who has option for the poor and those who live at the margins, at the periphery. So this is the culture we talk about. So when somebody comes up, he wants to be a priest, he wants to live in the glass house, he wants to drive Porsche car, he wants to only work in the parish, he doesn't want to work in the ghetto. That is not, that is a distorted identity. Well, it is good that he is able to share what he wants. Good. He has an identity. You have to help him now to redirect. Give him an orientation into the culture he has entered into, the Vincentian lifestyle, way of living, which he wants to become part of it. So this is how we do it here. Do you like it? So we have to teach him based on our culture, as I have explained. So I don't know if I have been able to answer your question.
Thank you. I'm happy with that. I see a raised hand. Father Callisto.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Mais alguma contribuição?
Padre Calixto, eu dizia que veja a mão do Padre José Luiz, agora do Miguel e do Miguel também.
Padre Linus.
Thank you, Father Cosmas, for your input. I'm Father Joseph from Rwanda, Burundi region. Just
Welcome,
would like to
Father
ask,
Joseph.
yeah, I would like to ask a question regarding this pastoral for vocation. When we see in today's situation, to do pastoral vocation seems to be difficult because many youth today, when they finish their secondary schools, they are jobless. They cannot get a job. So when they realize that they cannot get a job, they decide to join the congregation in order to get a better life. And then I would like to ask, how can we discover a good vocation that a seminarian or a candidate has the right intention to become a priest? Thank you so much, Father.
Thank you, Father Joseph. Your question is very, very admirable. You see, on the first instance and at the phase level, that is the first time you are coming in contact with a candidate, you cannot say he has a joining vocation or he does not. He does not, because whatever he said to you may be what he has heard from others or what people have told him to go and say. So people even go to learn from others what to say, and they come and present it, and then they will impress you. But you don't know at the first level. In fact, maybe the first 1 year, you may still be in doubt that he has a vocation or he does not have. But what makes you to know whether somebody has a vocation? We mentioned two things here in this presentation. First of all, does he seek God? Does he seek God? Even though initially he entered because he wanted a job. There is no job out there in the country. He needs a job. Don't forget why Vincent joined the priesthood in the first instance. He didn't join because he wanted to be a Vincentian, care for the poor and needy. He wanted to get rich and take care of his family. That was his initial motivation. So people can come in with wrong motivation. It is the work of the formator now to help them, by presenting the right motivation and watching whether they will follow it. Because first of all, these people come in, they don't even know how to pray the liturgical prayers, which we pray. So when they come in, you introduce them to community prayer. They are not used to it before. So first month, second month, they'll be struggling, they're making a mistake. It doesn't mean that they don't have vocation. They are learning. So you watch them and see their progress. You may have up to, after 1 year, you can now sit down and assess. Do I think he has a vocation? Based on facts given, does he love prayer? And as I mentioned in this talk here, the prayer should not be only limited to community prayer. a formator should be able to take candidates to draw up personal programs of their prayer life. If you want them to share with you, they can share with you. If you want them to keep to themselves, but they must practice personal devotion, because this is how to build a culture: personal devotion, community prayer. Also, this person, is his identity becoming stable? Are you seeing something stable in him? So these are what you look out for. With the passage of time, you'll be able to realize whether this person is falling in line with the culture of the congregation, or he is not meant for this place. And if it's not meant for the place, after you feel you must have tried and referred him to his spiritual director, you can tell him, I can recommend it to another congregation or to the diocese. So that is how you know. But it is not something you know because the person has come to speak to you the first time or in 1 month. No, people can go and learn it. People can teach them how to make presentation, and they'll make it, and they will entice you. So you have to take your time and be conscious, be intentional in what you want to find out. So that is what I want to say about it. And also rely on the Holy Spirit. You know, as you ask him to pray, you pray with him, you also pray for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Father. Now we don't know.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm dar palavra, give word Father Linus.
Linus from the
Linus.
province of Nigeria. Thank you, Father Cosmas, for the presentation. I just want to clarify something from your presentation, and that is you talk about a psychological accompaniment and the spirituality, but I would have loved you to go a little bit more practical, the steps. Is it just enough bringing a psychologist into the formation house to do psychological assessment? What are the practical steps that a formator can use in accompanying these candidates? And as you know too well, I've been involved for years in psychological assessment. But if we come from a culture, an African culture, that there is a slim line between psychological understanding of life and a religious or spiritual understanding of life. And sometimes candidates and even formators find it difficult to understand when somebody is having a psychological problem or is having a religious problem, given the background that this person comes from. So what are the tools you can share with us that can help a formator to actually accompany a young African seminarian who comes into the formation house and who has probably undergone a psychological test? What more can be done by the formator to support the growth of that vocation?
I want to thank Father Linus for being part of this conference, and also for the question he has asked. Permit me to acknowledge him as one of those who trained me in what I'm doing now. And he is an expert in this area. So don't hesitate when I call you to fill in the gap. However, from experience, I have been one of those who have been very skeptical about psychological testing, because from the culture where I come from here in Nigeria, people seem to use it to witch hunt, and the psychologists, not all of them, some of them, most times they, instead of doing what I call a mere recommendation, or perhaps instead of their recommendations being used as a recommendation, the formator now, or the superior as it were, try to take hook, line, and sinker what was observed just within a week or 2 weeks to be the reality, and which may even land the person home. I know that in some aspects, yes, but in some other aspects, just like Father is saying, is it enough? Now, in most aspects, it is not enough, because psychology, as I understand it, has to do with human relationship. Now, how will a formator find out whether somebody is actually psychologically balanced? You don't keep somebody far away to observe him. You bring somebody close to you. Perhaps let the person walk around your office as a formator. put him in a very sensitive office where he will have to encounter you, encounter perhaps everybody, where he'll be seen. And then sometimes multitask him, give him assignments, which of course you know he can carry, but will take some energy from him. Then you watch how he is able to deliver. I used to have a candidate who, one of my superiors those days told me to expel, that the boy cannot make it. I said, Father, please, could you allow me 1 year to just understudy him? Now, I discovered that from his background, he came from a very slow and, will I say, sluggish family background, where they take their time and drag themselves before they do things. And he wanted to use that in the community. And I told him this will count against you. So I brought him close to me. I gave him 3 different functions. And these functions will expose him, put him on his feet. He will have no time to lazy about. He has to be on his toes. And I gave him close monitoring. Because again, most times we don't follow up people. We only wait to see them make mistakes so that we'll catch them on the mistake. Follow them up. Where they want to lack, hold them, say, you cannot lack here, you must do it. You must do it. You know, when you want to help somebody, you actually go all out to help the person. Unless when you are tired or you've given up on the person, you're waiting for the mistake to send him away. But when you want to help somebody, you must go all out. The work of a formator is not an armchair job. You just sit down and relax. You must be in the field. You must be on your toes. It is not to be a policeman to go and catch and kill, as we used to express here in our own part of the world. But it is to make sure that he doesn't make mistake. And if he makes it, he has to do it well. He must get it right. So once you have been able to follow up all this in terms of apostolates, in terms of functions, in terms of offices, you know, tasking him to see whether you can bring out the best or that equilibrium can be ascertained and it is not working out. That is when I can now perhaps go back to the psychological report and see whether they are saying the same thing and say, no, it has said it and I have observed it, you have to go. So that is how I have operated this 12 whole years in formation. And I think for me, it is a highly recommended way to go. When a report comes to you, don't just take it hook, line, and sinker as if it is a Bible. Try to observe. You must be on your toes as a formator. Be on your toes and be objective. Objectivity is very important. Most times, some formators are biased. You see somebody, just the way he walks, you say he can't make it. He can't be a priest. Why? Look at the way he's walking. Or look at his head. Or look at the way he's talking. Or these are perhaps from background, things that came with him from the background. If you have studied his biography, his profile, and you followed him all along, discover that he's not doing them intentionally to destroy himself or the community. But that's what he taught best. So again, if a formator is interested in a candidate, you have to help him. I don't know, Father, if I have been able to answer. If you have more, please throw in more light, Father.
Thank you, Father Cosmas. And you know why I'm saying this is that most of the psychological devices are designed in the Western world, and a lot of us who are psychologists and who try to apply them look at it from the point of view of the Western world. But in our own African situation, can we help our formators to understand people not from a Western perspective, but from an African perspective, so that they can integrate what it means to be an African into what it means to be an African seminarian, desiring to be an African priest, first and foremost, because you talk about a stable identity. And a stable identity has to carry along who we are and what we stand for. Primarily, if I don't identify myself in wholeness, who I am, it's difficult to get into the religious life and think I can just embrace Christianity or Vincentian community. First of all, you have to be a stable African, understand what it means, who a person is. And the work of the formator, I think, is to have a relationship, authentic relationship with the candidate. And this relationship between is made when a formator is able to sit with the candidate and have a brotherly conversation. You know, if we get back to the very first psychological thing we learn about the Johari's window, whereby the you I know, the public self the blind self, the hidden self, and the dark self. When those lines are broken, it is feedback, communication, and constant understanding of the struggles of that person that can help him to grow, rather than just using devices that has been designed elsewhere to hunt down a seminarian whose background is very different from where those devices were being made. That's the practical thing. I wanted to communication, feedback, and a relationship with the candidates.
Thank you very much, Father. Professor, I hail.
You're welcome.
Tradução para português, o tradutor não estava a escutar bem, não estava a escutar. Mas vamos dar a palavra ao Padre José Luiz, da vice-presidência de Moçambique. Não sei se nos escuta.
Sim. Sim, boa tarde a todos e parabéns pela iniciativa. Obrigado. A pergunta que é feita vai na linha da direção espiritual que está a ser apresentada. Eu não escutei muito bem. É para ser feita durante a etapa vocacional ou já depois, quando entram no primeiro ano do seminário? E se é durante a etapa vocacional, como é que poderemos fazer esse trabalho da melhor forma? Se é no primeiro ano propedêutico, se é um diretor, imaginemos, para 60 seminaristas, como é o meu caso aqui, ou se temos que ter vários diretores espirituais. Obrigado.
Another one. Mais uma outra pessoa que quer intervir, mais um outro confrade.
Não sei se vão responder a pergunta do Padre José Luiz antes.
Sorry. Sorry, desculpa, Padre José Luiz, esperamos pela resposta. We're waiting for answer.
D'accord.
Father Callisto, I don't know if he received the translation.
Calixto, temos necessidade de tradução da pergunta. É assim, para que o P. Cosmas consiga compreender a pergunta em inglês. Se algum de Ernesto, você pode fazer a tradução para o inglês?
Vou tentar. Father Cosmas,
Oui.
Father José Luis was asking if the accompaniment, because we were speaking about the spiritual director, it will be before he enter in the seminar or during his formation. And Father José Luis said he has 60 seminarians. How many directors he need? And the process of accompaniment, how often it will be?
Wow. 60 seminarians. At what level? What level? Philosophy, theology, or both?
It's a propedeutic.
60 is a large number. He would need, first of all, co-formators. Does he have co-formators? He can't do it alone. He needs co-formators, at least 2 co-formators with him, making 3. And also spiritual directors, not less than 3. Not less than 3. Not less. Yes. And one of the things I have also learned information is it's always good to have more than one to give the candidates opportunity of making a choice who they want to choose among them, you know. And if you are talking only of spiritual director, I also would like a mixture of religious sisters and religious priests or brothers. So the male and the female as directors also help to balance the psyche and call it the overall formation of the candidates. It will help them. So one is not an option. No, minimum of 3. You can have as many as possible.
And also, if the confinement, it's before they enter in the seminar, or it starts when they are in?
Well, before they enter the seminary, there is always somebody in charge of them, called maybe a vocations director. So the person should be able to know where they're coming from. It's important. You know their family, where they live. Then you can also ask them to write a kind of a profile of themselves. Now, when they enter also into the seminary, the director should also request that they write a new one. I'm sure the old one will still be in their file. They should let them write a new one. So you will also compare and contrast. This is how to know people as well. Don't be tired of reading. Then you must accompany them once a month. I don't know how long your process takes, but not more than once in 2 months, because you need to see them as frequently as possible. You know, either monthly or bi-monthly. You need to hear what they are saying. Hear what they are saying is important. If not, it will turn into a university where there is no connection and interaction.
Thank you. Obrigado.
Obrigado. Thank you very much. Se não houver mais alguém para intervir, daremos a palavra ao nosso assistente, Padre Dominique.
Desculpa, Calixto, somente dizer que o P. Dominic vai falar em francês. Então, aqueles que têm necessidade de tradução para o inglês podem entrar embaixo na interpretação ao francês. No francês, no canal de francês, temos o P. Robert, Nicolas Robert, que fará a tradução não em francês, em inglês, mas ele está no canal de francês. Não sei se algum dos que falam inglês podem fazer tradução de isso.
For those who have difficulty, you can go there down. There is a place where they can touch and to have.
I don't speak English, okay? For translated in English, you are the opportunity to in French later. French for English. French for English.
Tu peux parler en français. C'est pas grave.
Padre Cinema, Está-nos a escutar? Sim. Temos para a tradução para francês, português, para cinema.
É o Pé Robert Nicolas que vai fazer a tradução do francês para o inglês.
Para o inglês.
Para o inglês, sim, porque Dominique vai falar em francês. Mas com a necessidade, tem que entrar ao francês para escutar em inglês. Isso é a ideia.
Ao assistente, para Dominique. Welcome.
Dominique.
Thank you.
Ah, okay.
Thank you.
Bonsoir, mon père.
Oui, Cosmas, un grand merci
Oui, mon père, oui.
pour la présentation.
Merci, mon père.
Ok.
Merci, mon père.
Je peux commencer?
Oui.
Ok.
On a presque fini. On a presque
Oui.
fini.
Ok,
Oui.
alors je commence.
Oui.
Voilà, mes chers confrères, comme c'est une journée importante, c'est la COVIAM qui devait parler. Eh bien, c'est une grande joie pour moi de vous voir présents, de vous voir nombreux. Je voudrais juste vous encourager pour le travail que vous êtes en train de réaliser et ainsi partager cette modeste réflexion avec vous. En présentant son programme pour les 6 prochaines années, donc il en reste 5, on a déjà fait une année, il en reste 5, le supérieur général nous invite à lire et à méditer le document final de l'Assemblée générale 2022 et les 11 points qu'il confie à toute la congrégation de la mission, les 2 documents. Dans le document final, si vous lisez le document final...
Não há tradução, não há tradução português.
Ok.
Il a dit qu'il n'y a pas de traduction pour le portugais.
Pour le portugais. Et comment on fait? On continue?
Para cinema, desativar o som.
Il demande le son?
Il y a para cinema, mas non ha desativato il son.
Sí. Para cinema debe activar el micrófono.
Il microfono.
Le cinéma, tu comprends?
Il microfono desattivato, Dominique. Quello è il problema.
Il suo o il mio?
No, il di cinema.
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 Microfono para cinema, microfono. Desativar il microfono.
Hugo, tú le puedes pedir que active el micrófono.
Sí, le estoy pidiendo, pero no responde.
Agora como é?
Sí.
Agora já
Alguém que possa traduzir do francês para o inglês?
Alors, on peut continuer, Père Dominique.
On peut continuer. Vous me comprenez? Vous me comprenez?
Oui.
Oui, mon père.
Ok. Donc, le Père général nous invite à méditer sur les 2 documents. Si vous lisez le document final de l'Assemblée générale 2022, la 4e priorité parle de la formation du clergé et cette 4e priorité met également l'accent sur la priorité à accorder à la promotion d'une culture des vocations.
There is a place talking about the priority that have to be given to.
Le deuxième et le troisième point parlent aussi de la priorité que nos provinces, nos vice-provinces et nos régions doivent accorder à la promotion des vocations. Le Père général parle même d'une coordination de la promotion des vocations pour permettre à la congrégation de la mission de respirer, comme il le dit lui-même, avec ses deux poumons. Respirer avec ses deux poumons, parce que dans la congrégation de la mission, il y a des prêtres, il y a également des frères. Je crois qu'en accordant la priorité à la promotion des vocations, le Père général a bien compris qu'avoir une bonne culture des vocations, c'est assurer l'avenir de la congrégation de la mission. Sans une bonne promotion des vocations, l'avenir de la congrégation de la mission devient incertain, hypothétique. Et dans cette formation qui se veut unique, progressive, permanente et intégrale, comme le dit Ratio Fundamentalis, il est un devoir pour nous de protéger, de faire croître et de soutenir les vocations. Il est un devoir pour nous de nous occuper de la naissance, du discernement et de l'accompagnement des vocations. Il nous faut accompagner convenablement les jeunes qui veulent embrasser la vie consacrée dans la congrégation de la mission, en particulier afin que ce jeune arrive à bien vérifier l'authenticité de leur motivation, que ces jeunes arrivent à faire un bon discernement. Et dans une société de consommation comme la nôtre, où il y a souvent abandon de tout effort pour acquérir les valeurs spirituelles et religieuses, et où souvent les jeunes revendiquent une autonomie absolue, il convient qu'on leur présente des situations stimulantes, qu'on leur présente des situations positives pour susciter et favoriser l'éclosion de vocations. C'est Pastores Dabo Vobis qui le dit. Parce que la formation à l'identité vincentienne est unique, permanente et intégrale, la promotion des vocations dans la congrégation de la mission exige de donner un bon témoignage de vie aux jeunes. Donner un bon témoignage de vie à nos jeunes. L'éclosion des vocations vincentiennes arrivera si les jeunes qui nous côtoient nous voient vivre nous-mêmes le premier notre identité. Apprenons alors à former et accompagner les jeunes moins avec des paroles qu'avec la vie. La formation est un processus de conversion permanente. La formation est un processus de transformation du cœur. La transformation du cœur. Et cette transformation du cœur doit être graduelle, doit se faire de façon graduelle afin de vivre convenablement notre identité. que par notre témoignage de vie, dans la fidélité à notre identité, de nombreux jeunes découvrent leur vocation et que Dieu saisisse et transforme leur cœur pour œuvrer dans sa vigne. La moisson est abondante, mais les ouvriers sont peu nombreux. Prions le maître de la moisson d'envoyer des ouvriers à sa moisson. Prions-nous chaque jour. Et je vous remercie de tout cœur.
Merci beaucoup, assistante général, Padre Dominique. Agora, vou dar a palavra ao Padre Rolando.
Listo, aqui estou.
Sim. Sim. Dou a
Obrigado,
palavra.
obrigado. Não consigo te escutar muito bem.
Não sei se alguém teria alguma pergunta a fazer ao assistente geral. E depois disso, vamos ouvir as últimas considerações do Padre Rolando. If someone want to ask something, our assistant or Father Linus.
Unmute yourself, Father Lino.
Thank you so much. I don't know who organized this conference, but I would have thought that it would be important for the formators in the COVIAM theologate to be part of this conference. And because listening to you, Assistant General, most of the things you picked up about the document that the Superior General is sending out from the General Assembly of the 2022, talking about prioritizing our formation and then the uniqueness, progressive, integral, those things are very important. If we have to really focus on formation from the COVIAM group and to strengthen our formation. One of the things that struck me in one of the General Assembly that I went, that was 2010, was one of the conference said that the problem in Africa is formation. And if the problem in Africa is a formation, we have to intensify our formation in the whole of the provinces in Africa. Because like I always say, Africa is the future of the congregation of the mission. So I don't know how we can make this kind of conference to carry the COVIAM theologate and all the formators within the African conference in Madagascar.
Merci beaucoup. Vous me comprenez?
Yes.
Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Oui. Je crois que c'est une très bonne question. Une très bonne question. Au mois de septembre, j'étais à Enugu. Il y avait formation de formateurs. Et la dernière semaine, j'ai beaucoup parlé de cela. C'est très important de comprendre que notre formation doit être permanente pour toute la vie. Et notre formation doit être intégrale, c'est-à-dire toutes les dimensions de la personne humaine. On a besoin de cela. Et j'ai beaucoup parlé aux formateurs et je me suis rendu compte qu'en Afrique, on doit encore beaucoup faire quand on parle de la formation parce qu'on ne se fait pas toujours une idée claire de cette formation, mais elle doit être vraiment pour toute la vie et qu'elle soit intégrale. Et ce que vous dites est très juste. Je partage totalement ce que vous dites. Je crois qu'en Afrique, il faudrait on trouve des voies et moyens pour aider les formateurs à comprendre cela et que dans nos maisons de formation, on se préoccupe de cette formation qui doit aller durant toute la vie, qui ne s'arrête pas à certaines étapes, qui va toute la vie et qui soit intégrale, c'est-à-dire englobe toutes les dimensions de la personne. Une très bonne question. Merci beaucoup.
Grazie.
Merci, merci. Je pense que nous sommes déjà en train de venir parce que c'est le temps de venir. Alors, merci beaucoup au Père Dominique Iolo pour ces paroles. Merci beaucoup aussi au Père Cosmas pour la conférence. Et merci Callisto pour l'organisation d'aujourd'hui. Véritablement, c'était un besoin de formation, des besoins véritables de formation permanente et intégrale, comme l'a dit le Père Dominique. Et les mercredis prochains, on va voir la deuxième session de formation de cette année, que c'est le troisième du projet. Et je voudrais dire seulement que nous avons le devoir, le véritable devoir de faire une culture de vocation avec notre vie, surtout avec notre vie. Et avec notre vie aussi, avec les confrères qui nous habitons, pour les inviter à participer la semaine prochaine, nous avons encore l'opportunité. Et je pense que c'est une petite initiative que nous avons commencée, mais cette petite initiative, nous devons les profiter et pour continuer à grandir surtout la culture de vocation. Alors, merci mes confrères, et on va continuer avec ce travail la semaine prochaine et je ne sais pas, beaucoup.